Good evening, this is Aaron Matthews with his sales presentation for Eugene Kozlovski. This is the Enterprise in Sales module, element 011. So if we could look at the first slide, basically we've got a bit of a presentation overview for you. My name's Aaron Matthews and I am a business development manager for a company called Satellite UK. Now, Satellite UK is a contract furniture company in the sort of hospitality end of the furniture market. Now, essentially, what we've got here is we're going to look at a few different bits and pieces in this presentation based on what I'm going to talk about. So on this overview slide, you can see we're going to be talking a little bit about the company, a little bit about the academic framework that I've chosen to follow to do this presentation. We're also going to look at our plan for healthcare to penetrate the market. The student accommodation, of course, we're looking to penetrate that market too. The conclusions based upon the findings and the academic kind of references that I have, and of course we'll take one or two audience questions. I'll just take a couple at the end. So yeah, let's begin. So as I say, Satellite UK is a furniture company which is in the hospitality sector, and the hospitality sector at the moment is somewhat flooded, it's somewhat saturated. Therefore, what the management decided to do was to look at a few different markets where they could potentially kind of penetrate and get in there and make some extra money and diversify. So after several meetings, they decided they would look for a healthcare and student accommodation specialist if they could find one, and essentially they've elected to bring me, Aaron, on board. So that is why I am at Satellite. Now, essentially, there's a lot of money in both sectors, but we'll look at how we're going to get into those sectors, and we'll look at why we've chosen them a little bit later. So, essentially, let me move on to the slide number 3, I believe. Satellite UK overview. Now, at the moment, as a company, we are turning over approximately 4.5 million. Now, so we're a small company, only approximately 16 employees. Now, as I say, we're in hospitality, so that accounts for kind of leisure, restaurants, hotels, that kind of thing. So a lot of competition in those markets, really, and it would be difficult to take a significant percentage of those and you know, in a year, you know, to really drastically increase your turnover. So we've looked at these new markets, and healthcare and student education are the ones that look the most profitable and look the best ones to go into. So slide number 4, the academic framework that I've chosen is quite a complex one, and it's actually from Peter Senge, a Harvard professor. Now, what this essentially entails is looking at various aspects of the company, all the facets possible, and looking at how you can kind of use them to your competitive advantage, essentially. So let's take a look at the slide. Now, we're looking at the deep learning cycle and strategic architecture, which understands really a company's aims and, you know, its kind of goals and that sort of thing. So it's guiding ideas, and yeah, we're looking at a fundamental growth plan in order to take the company from X sales to Y sales. We're looking to you know, use the following attributes in order to improve the company, essentially. So the first one is practices. Now, in order to evaluate one's practices, what you're essentially doing is looking at how you operate at the moment and looking at, you know, what you need to do in order to be proficient enough to get into these new markets. So it's important to know how your business is operating now. Part B is you're looking at your skills in terms of your staff. Now, Satellite, for example, brought me on board because they don't know much about student accommodation, they don't know much about healthcare, it's not really their thing. So they identified, as you know, basically in conjunction with what Senge says, that it's absolutely necessary to not make do with what you've got, but to, you know, bring on board expertise in order to support your venture and ensure that you're successful in what it is that you're doing. Okay. So C is your relationships. Now, of course, me being in those markets, I've got lots of relationships with people in the NHS, lots of relationships with school managers, with bursars, you know, just influential people who might buy furniture. So again, they kind of looked at what relationships they have already. They know some architects and designers that could potentially specify them into schools, but not enough to be successful. Again, so that was the thinking behind hiring me. So part D, sensibilities and awareness. Now, again, this is a tricky one, because if we actually look at, you know, a company's sensibilities and awareness, it's essentially kind of like prior knowledge. Now, it's something, if you're in a specialist kind of market, you, of course, you know your market, but probably not a lot else, which is, you know, what the case was here. So I do think in this case their awareness was quite low. So again, it's another reason why they've brought me on in order to kind of enforce their awareness in the market and understand the sensibilities, the soft spots on NHS, for example. Injury to nurses, for bursars in schools. We're talking about large auditing processes, sensibilities that you can use to a competitive advantage. Part E, of course, we are looking at beliefs. Now, beliefs in terms of, I'd say, a company culture. You're looking at where's the company headed as one organism? Is it drifting in the same direction? Do all staff kind of believe in the mission and want to go the same way? Part F, we're looking at the organisational actions. Now, this is of paramount importance that you must have an organisational plan and everyone must believe in it. So this is something that needed to be addressed from the very start, so that everybody who would be potentially involved in this process could understand why we've picked this academic framework. And finally, G, we're looking at the results essentially, and the assessments of progress. So again, this, because it is a kind of like a circular kind of motion of a process, you could start with the practices, you could start with the beliefs, but essentially what we're doing, if we look at the diagram, is we are undergoing a kind of company audit almost to see what we know, what is the mission, where are we going, why are we doing it, and we're ending up at this, kind of result which we're analysing, and it's all based on where we're trying to get to, and that of course is the penetration of healthcare and student accommodation markets. So this is why I've chosen Senge's framework. It makes sense for the business, it's very thorough, and I just genuinely believe that this is the correct one based on the results we're trying to achieve. There are one or two others. For example, there's Stephen Povey, 2007. He wrote he basically wrote a kind of academic framework that suggests that everything's built on relationships, and I just felt that was a little bit too vague essentially for the project we're doing, because it involves too much specialist knowledge, it involves too many people in the process, and I really did figure that Senge's framework was the perfect one based on how thorough it was and based on hitting all of the correct kind of parts that the business needs to focus on. So the next slide, we are looking at our healthcare plan to try and penetrate healthcare. So this entailed essentially, after long discussion with senior management, we decided that banquet seating, which you can see in the picture alongside the notes here, would be absolutely ideal because they're great for waiting areas. You can even use them on wards, to be honest, and they're wonderful value. So this was something we decided from the very get-go, from the very beginning, that we should use, because no other supplier is selling banquet seating, which means we could attack the NHS because we've got a unique product, which means we don't have to be on the NHS contract. So it was quite innovative thinking in that way, to use a product we've already got to penetrate a huge market. We also looked at polypropylene chairs, which are essentially kind of plastic moulded chairs. Again, for some reason, the 3 companies on contract with the NHS are not selling these, and infection prevention people love them. So again, this was a bit more kind of creative thinking that we used to try and make sure departments such as infection control, infection prevention want to use us, certainly, as opposed to the contracted companies. So they're also very good value. So lateral thinking, essentially, we're using existing products in our range but in new ways. Instead of putting them into bars, into restaurants, into pubs, we'll be putting them into restaurants, in hospitals, and we'll be putting them into waiting rooms, onto wards. They can still very much serve a purpose and do a good job in these new environments. So a bit of lateral thinking. We don't need to essentially reinvent the wheel here, which we will touch on here with John Adair in 1990 in his book. He mentioned innovation is a gradual process. You don't just reinvent the wheel overnight, you do it step by step, you little change at a time. So we've changed our thinking in terms of our way that we're going to go into the healthcare market, and we're not doing a whole lot different, but what we are doing different is different enough that it will give us a foothold onto the first rung of the ladder. So next slide. Of course, we need to be very flexible as an organisation. We absolutely must adapt. Dr. Bennett, Alex Bennett, actually, 2006, well, he talks about super creativity, which is, I suppose, if you're in a tech company like Apple or something, reinventing the wheel may be a bit more kind of what you're trying to strive to achieve. So we believe at the moment, more in the theory we discussed earlier by Adair, that innovation must be step by step. We're a small company, we don't have budgets to be trying to focus all of our energies on reinventing super new products. So yeah, we thought the theory from Alex Bennett was essentially a little bit far-fetched. It's not something we're looking to do at the moment. Super creativity, it may well be in the future, but we're just looking to make small changes to existing products to kind of perfect their use in the environments for which they're intended. So yeah, essentially what we need to look at really was our suppliers. Of course, our suppliers who supply for pubs, for restaurants. We weren't quite sure whether or not we'd want the same people for healthcare, for student accommodation. Reason being is there are different environments, there are different strength testing laws, there are a whole lot of factors. So we thought at first it might be a good idea to get some new suppliers. There was a bit of a backlash on that with the current suppliers. Don't know how. Somehow they found out. Someone told them that we were looking to enter these two markets. So in the end, senior management, who have been very happy with their performance before I arrived for the last few years, decided, okay, let's give these people a chance. They do a very good job in our other markets, so therefore I think it does make sense really. So we gave them a go instead of finding new ones essentially. So yeah, penetrating the all-important NHS, we needed to really think about, you know, would suppliers let us down on our first orders? From what we could tell, lead times were still very good compared to the competition. We had a unique product compared to the competition, so again, we stuck with these guys. And we also noticed that if we were to get into the NHS, we had to get the kind of ground troops on our side. By ground troops, I'm talking nurses. They really kind of, you know, they do the hard work, they deal with the patients, they know what they need. So we knew we had to try and, you know, target them. Next slide. Now, this is also important. We had to try and get on vital frameworks. Now, of course, I'm not talking about academic frameworks here. I'm talking about contracts, essentially, like public contracts, the NHS contracts, local government contracts, school contracts. They all have approved furniture suppliers, and it's something that you need to be if you want to provide these people. So there are a lot of barriers to market. The NHS contracts doesn't come around to 2019, which basically forced our arm into having to use products we've already got that are unique to the competitors. Therefore, these bespoke solutions came about. A lot of risks now. You've got to get it right, really, in your first few orders, because word of mouth will eventually spread. It always does. Nurses talk to each other, procurement departments talk to each other. So yeah, the risk was quite high in terms of diversifying, but also we weren't changing too much in the way we produce. So again, we kind of minimised it a bit more there. So there were risks, but calculable risks that we were willing to take. We actually came up with an idea, because of this bespoke kind of route we were looking to go down, that we would put on the website, on the Satellite UK website, like an order form, and you could specify your dimensions for your banquet seating, polypropylene chairs. So essentially you could have it any size you want. If you wanted the seat height a bit higher, no problem, just put in the dimension, we'll make it. So that has proven very, very popular, and it has been a source of quite a few orders, particularly from healthcare. So yeah, it's been an excellent addition to the website. Now, Davenport and Brooks in 2004, they talked about kind of, you know, looking at your supply chain management and lowering your lead times by up to 75%. So it all sounds well and good. I don't think Satellite UK could get their lead times down to by that much, because we're quite competitive anyway in the industry. But we did take a look, and we changed one or two things in terms of shipping companies, that kind of thing, so that we could have an express range, which again is an advantage over the existing competition if you can deliver in 2 or 3 weeks instead of 4 to 6 weeks. So yeah, that was an important point to look at. We, in terms of our fabrics, we decided to offer any fabric the customer wanted. Some furniture companies only work with certain fabric manufacturers, or only loyal to certain ones. We decided that the customer could select anything, again, just to get our foot in the door. We don't normally do it, and we may not moving forward, because it's a lot of work, a lot of relationships to maintain. However, it's worked up until now, so that's good. And yeah, we sort of we increased a few perks for the customers as well. We were extra hard on customer service. We increased our warranty to 7 years to make it compatible with the companies on contract. It was 5 years, and we've thrown in free aftercare. So giving them lots of benefits is again another creative way to kind of, you know, drive the sale without reinventing the wheel, as Adair said. So. Next slide. Generating profits through problems. Now, where this kind of little notion came from is we had a problem with an order, with the NHS, and basically the nurses had told us they wanted to order this banquet seating. They said it was exactly what they were after, and unfortunately we kind of, in our haste to sell, we didn't really consult estates, facilities or procurement. Of course they weren't too happy about this, so once we found out about this problem, a nurse phoned it in one day and she said, we can't order. Procurement have said no because they don't know what the product is. So I, of course, picked up the phone and made an appointment, rushed in there to try and solve the problem. Luckily, it went well. They were very empathetic with my situation. However, they did express that they did not like being left out of crucial decisions, which, of course, you know, I fully understood. So, however, it was almost like the problem had generated a good relationship. So, yeah, we'll come to that in just a moment. Now, Thompson in 2004 did mention this. He did say entrepreneurs see issues not as problems but as money-making opportunities, essentially. If you can deal well with a problem and prove yourself to a customer to be able to deal and problem solve with their issues, then yeah, you know, you can really build brilliant relationships based on problems, essentially. So like I told you about the crisis at the hospital, yeah, replicating that meeting, because we'd actually gone and done it in probably 2 or 3 other hospitals, and the other meetings didn't go quite so well, because we're talking about different personality types. Often procurement specialists are very kind of reserved. They won't sort of tell you what they're thinking. They're non-confrontational. They're very kind of laid back in that way. So we've had kind of, well, we've got to the point where 1 or 2 of them are simply still not ordering from us. So this generating a profit through problems is not something you should really be targeting doing. However, it's certainly something you should consider if a problem arises, but I wouldn't go down the route of creating a problem or anything like that. It would be ludicrous. So you've also got to look at the timing after an incident. If an incident happens and it's complained about, you've got to jump on it. You've got to sort the problem now and be very time effective. If you leave it a week, 10 days, it's just going to fester away, and they're going to become more and more disdainful with poor service. And yeah, you know, it's the time taken to recover from something like that could be years. They may not order from us again for years. So it's very important to give this a lot of thought. Next slide. Our student accommodation plan, based upon what we did in the healthcare market, was a lot more reserved. Now, we went thundering into healthcare at the bottom level. Now, we were going in, we're going to see nurses, we're going to see matrons, people that work on the ground, essentially. But what we forgot is, while these people are very influential in essentially deciding what it is they want and pushing for what they want, they don't make the final decision, they don't hold the purse strings. So that we shot ourselves in the foot there by excluding procurement specialists and the upper management who sign off budgets, essentially. So when we entered the student accommodation market, we learnt from these mistakes and we carefully researched what staff are involved in furniture purchasing, which luckily for us was a lot less than in healthcare. Now, we had to think really, really hard about how it was we were going to enter. So what we did, we literally went in at the top level. We went in with the estates bursar, who is essentially someone with a budget for furniture and for maintenance. And yes, it was the best thing to do, because they may say at first, well, yes, I am the person for the job, or you need to speak to this person. However, they're happy that you've included them in the process. So sometimes it is best to start at the top of the tree and then get recommendations from that person about where you should go next. So that's what we did. We included everyone, essentially, right down to the final maintenance guys, teachers, whoever it was making the decision. We included everyone, and worked wonders, it really did. So what we did actually, we went to see, one day, we went to go and see an estates bursar, and he said, it's been a nightmare. At the end of every year, I have to count the cushions on a sofa around the schools, and all of the cushions must be the same number at the start of the year to at the end of the year, which of course they never are, because students take each other's cushions into bedrooms, common areas, they throw them around, they destroy them, throw them in the bin. So we actually came up with a sofa that incorporated the cushion into the actual sofa. So you couldn't extract the cushion because there wasn't a cushion to extract. It was just a comfortable sofa with no cushions. And it went down a real treat at a school where they had various common rooms and a sofa in each bedroom. And the guy said, "You've really taken an auditing headache away from me." So again, it was this small creative thinking. We didn't reinvent the wheel. In fact, we subtracted from what there usually is. We just took away the cushions but put the upholstery over the top. Very simple. And yeah, we've just been selling on the features and benefits of sofas like that, and sales have really done very well. So we do feel that the technique that we've employed, the framework from Senge, you know, does work, providing you use it properly and you do include everybody involved. Next slide is our conclusions, really. So creative solutions are fully necessary. It's in the framework. It says all staff need to be thinking the same way. The company, you know, kind of needs to know what resources it's going to throw at things. But yeah, to get your foot in the door, you often need to think about how you're going to do it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've proved that. Banquet seating's doing really well in healthcare. Could be doing a lot better had we executed our plan more efficiently, but you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So while some people are saying super creativity is what your business needs, I disagree, not necessarily. As Adair says, step by step. Pitch the features and the benefits. Don't sell a sofa with no cushions. Sell a lack of an auditing problem at the end of the year for a bursar. He'll listen more. Speak to the right people, so crucial. If you're not speaking to the right people and you ignore them, you're going to get some angry people. That's not really what we're after. We're looking to admit fault and accept failure. This is the selling by problems kind of philosophy. If you do make a mistake, it's very important that you own up. You say, "I'm very sorry, yes, I made a mistake. However, I will fix it this way." It's a very good chance you'll keep your customer and indeed even possibly make them happier. So learn from your mistakes. I'd say don't make the same mistake twice. Learn how the mistake happened, why it happened, and what you can do to prevent it. And most importantly, do not repeat the mistake with the same customer, or you will lose them. And finally, everyone in business must be on the same page. So everyone in your company must understand the mission and the aims and the goals of a company, just like Senge indicated. And that involves close inspection of the business as a whole organism and various attributes as discussed at the beginning. So right, not much time left. That's about it from me. Now on the last slide, of course, we're looking for audience questions, and thank you very much for providing me with your feedback. That's excellent. I'm just going to read out two, okay? So I've got one here that says, how long would it take to recover from an issue like you had with the NHS? It was a brilliant question. It really is, because it could take months, could take years. You just simply don't know. It depends on the customer, depends on their personality and how offended they are, really. So I'd love to be able to say, oh, only 6 months, but in reality, probably not the case. It depends on the client, but jump on that problem as soon as you find it, I would say. Another question we got here, Did you have to invent a new product for the student accommodation market to break into it? Good question. No, I wouldn't say to break into it. We didn't have to invent the sofa with the cushionless sofa. It wasn't fully necessary. However, what it's done is it has given us an ingenious product that nobody else is selling. So I'd say we didn't need it to break into the market. However, what we've done with the sofa is give people a reason to come to us because it's an exclusive product. We're the only ones that do it, and yeah, so I would say no, we don't, but it's good to have one if of course you do have one. If not, use what you have, but in a different way, like we did with the banquette seating. Alright, thank you very much for listening. That's the end of the presentation. Goodbye.